Hello, everyone, and welcome to the special edition of Energy Frontiers. I am Bosin Omofaye here in Lagos. The Nigerian government has unveiled a new energy compact agenda that will help the country deliver energy sustainability between now and the year 2030. That robust program was delivered at the just concluded African Heads of State Energy Summit in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Now let's take a listen to Nigeria's Energy Minister as he delivered the welcome address and the opening sequence of a major presentation.
Let me start by saying that I'm particularly excited about this Mission 300 program, which is an ambitious initiative spearheaded by the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank, which is aimed at providing electricity access to 300 million people and clean cooking solutions to about 60 million households across Africa by year 2030. This initiative represents a bold vision for transforming Africa's energy landscape and fostering economic growth, human capital development, and sustainable progress. Nigeria's participation in this initiative aligns with our strategic national goals and strengthens our efforts to provide universal access to electricity by year 2030. We recognize the transformative impact that Mission 300 will have on electrifying Nigeria and encourage other African countries to leverage this program to drive significant progress in energy access across Africa collectively. Through this bold initiative, we can overcome challenges and achieve our common goal as a people, as Nigerians, as Africans. We heard during the opening remark, my dear friend, talking about 86 million people in Nigeria that still lack access to electricity. Yes, it is that huge. We achieved some reasonable level of improvement during year 2024, just about 53% increase in electricity access, about 59%, about 62, 63%, but we still have a long way to go. Let me blow your mind by saying that in spite of these 86 million people that lack access to electricity, we already electrified over 150 million Nigerians because we have a population of over 200 million people. It is that huge. But we should not restrict this to just access improvement alone or increasing access. The 150 million people are already electrified. They have access to electricity. But is the access reliable? Because reliability actually matters. A lot of manufacturing companies, a lot of businesses, institutions in Nigeria, in urban area, they have access to electricity. But a lot of them are off the grid. They are not connected to the grid just because of lack of reliability. And reliability comes from stability of supply and functionality of supply. There are some manufacturing processes that even a 1 minute or 1 second blip alone can destroy the entire process. So as we are talking about improving access, we should talk about even improving the infrastructures of the existing access that we have so that we can actually have reliable, functional, and stable electricity supply. The power sector operators across the value chain, the investors, they have a lot of role to play. Power sector is a high-cost consuming sector and requires a whole lot of funds, which I believe government alone cannot provide. We can only lead by example. So we need both the local and foreign investment to make this sector work. We're talking about 300 million people in Africa, additional access by year 2030. We're talking of funds over $30 billion. This is a lot of money, and I believe that it is a concerted effort of everybody that will make us achieve this. Then our development partners. We thank you for the role we have been playing, but like Oliver Twist, we always ask for more. And they say the reward for hard work is more work. Until we get to the destination, please, you don't have to relent. But one of the discouragement, one of the disincentives in this sector that has not allowed us to move beyond this, our baby step, is the attitude of our people, the consumers themselves, in terms of vandalization of power assets. which we must all fight against. Vandalization of assets, be it transmission assets, distribution assets, looting of transformers, cutting of cables, all sorts of that, which government spend a lot of money on, including the private sector investors. How do we stop this? I think it's another question for us to discuss. Because as you are building something, and some people are pulling it down, you have a long way to go. Then lastly, the issue of power theft. And people have the attitude of power theft. Lots of meter bypassing, lots of illegal connections. All these are factors that can negatively influence the success of this project, which I believe we must also include in our plan towards achieving the goals and objectives of Mission 300.
Now let's take a listen to the special advisor on technical issues to the energy minister as he presents a very robust program plan of $32 billion US. The Nigerian government will bring in about $12 billion. The rest will come to the private sector, both local and international. Let's take a listen to him.
A lot has been said already about the level of electrification in Nigeria. 61% electrification rate in Nigeria. When we talk about clean cooking, there's 26% access to clean cooking in Nigeria. We have a generation capacity of, I would say, 12 to 14 gig, depending on adding Zogeru and the age of certain plants. Part of the biggest challenge that we see in Nigeria, as mentioned earlier, is the liquidity issue. In Nigeria, I would say last year we had the opportunity of generating over 6 gigawatts. We can tell you because we have the data. But in a system that is not paying for its energy bills and does not pay a cost-reflective tariff, it's also very challenging for the discos to take the energy. So I would say we picked about 5.6 gigawatts last year. And based on the analysis and the availability of energy, we could have easily exceeded 6 gigawatts last year. Part of the biggest challenges outside of the liquidity is transmission infrastructure. We have a lot of vandalization, as the Honorable Minister has mentioned, and this is very challenging. In a country that has limited space from a capital perspective, we continue to go back to fix this infrastructure on a regular basis rather than focusing on expanding infrastructure. Gas constraints. The lack of investment in gas. 75% of our generation is thermal. And Nigeria remains a thermal country, by the way. We will continue to use gas as a transition fuel, because this is our natural resource. But one thing that is important to touch base on is the fact that we have 14 gigawatts capacity for hydro in Nigeria. That is a significant capacity that we have not really tapped into. Hydro is still one of the cheapest sources of energy generation. And as a country such as Nigeria, we must tap into these resources to ensure that we can deliver least cost energy supply to consumers. Opportunities and challenges. And in my world, every challenge is an opportunity. Part of the challenge that I've seen in Nigeria is a lot of the capital that is pumped into this sector outside of government capital is short-term capital that requires a certain type of return, which the energy tariffs are not able to provide. The electricity sector is not the oil and gas sector that has such a large margin. The electricity sector is the sector that requires long-term cheap capital, which allows you to recover your cost over a period of time. There is a lot of investment required on the grid. And I am yet to see any country that has electrified or has industrialized purely based on mini grids. So the reality is that there has to be a combination of on-grid and off-grid investment to be able to drive the level of access and stability we need in the Nigerian electricity sector. From a clean cooking point of view, the target is 100%. This is very interesting because it is a significant challenge. Sometimes in Nigeria, we may not truly look at the impact of this, but we have over 150 million people that don't have access to clean cooking. And in terms of absolute numbers, is only second to China and India. So we have to look at what is possible here. And then in terms of share of renewables, we want to increase that, especially including hydro and private sector capitalization. We want to increase that to about 15.5 billion. Part of what we have to do as we look into Mission 300 is really to drive least cost planning in all our processes to ensure that we come out with a cost that allows us to set tariffs that actually answer our affordability question. Because that is a big question that Africa still needs to answer in terms of how much of a tariff can people actually afford and how do we make it affordable. I think one thing has been clear in Nigeria, we are gradually moving towards a cost-reflective tariff. We've done that on a segment of customers, which in Nigeria they call the Band A customers. So I think whenever we say that, people smile. But it's true. It has actually increased the level of energy payments in the sector from 10% to about 40%. And that's significant. From a policy point of view, we have to be committed to continue to drive that process. In my opinion, when you give an environment that is sustainable, you also have more people that are willing to invest. And then your regulatory environment also gradually gets stronger because they can push their agenda as hard as they can without feeling that they are also not giving on the tariff space. So there's a lot of work that has been done through REA on driving that investment in last mile. I believe we can increase that with interconnected mini grids, working with the discos and finding ways to partner in that segment. I think that would help reduce the pressure as well on the discos and really allow that capital to flow in without it necessarily being on the balance sheet of the discos. Without having a line of sight on your return, there is no way private sector will bring their money into this segment. So again, we hope that through Mission 300, we will be focusing on policies and regulation that will truly allow private sector capital to be catalyzed. I think Nigeria truly has the most to gain because we can sell energy to our neighbors. In a lot of the discussions I have with AfDB, Wale especially, he really is passionate about how we can actually trade energy. But trading energy is not as simple as it sounds. You know, you have your voltage levels, you have so many things that you have to control for interconnection to be able to work with our challenges on the national grid. This is also very, very difficult to connect with our neighbors. Again, goes back to reliability of infrastructure. If we're able to invest and drive reliable infrastructure, then we'll be able to connect with our neighbors and then we'll be able to sell electricity. So there's a lot of work that has to be done across the value chain to be able to achieve this. And there's a lot of profit for Nigeria if we're able to deliver on interconnection to our neighboring countries. So a portion of our investment in Mission 300 must go to capacity building. across the value chain. In Nigeria, we have the biggest gap. And in Nigeria, we believe that if Nigeria is successful from an electrification point of view, then the whole of Africa is moving forward. We have an investment plan across generation. We are still evaluating what we would require on a private sector perspective, because there's a lot of opportunity that will come as we continue to move more towards cost-reflective tariffs and where consumers are actually paying their energy bills. On transmission, it's just a no-brainer that we must continue to invest in transmission. We must continue to drive this investment to ensure interconnectivity, to ensure that the grid is actually managed and sustained. On distribution, we have to continue, which will link to the last mile. Without this, we cannot deliver quality, reliable energy to end users. On the off-grid segment, I think it's already clear that there's already a great program in Nigeria, probably the most viable market for the off-grid market, and we want to continue to drive that. But as we say, no country has fully electrified purely based on off-grid. We have to balance that with the on-grid. Clean cooking, maybe I haven't spent enough time on that, I apologize, but it is an area that we must focus on, and there's a significant opportunity to be able to drive investment across that value chain. So again, I hope with the presentation of this compact, our partners, development partners, have seen some of our plans, and as we continue to walk through this plan, I hope we'll be able to work together to be able to drive a successful Mission 300 in Nigeria.
Energy Week 2024.
I want to welcome everybody to this city, Cape Town, to Africa. Many call it Africa. We call it home. Welcome home.
Now, the audience in Dar es Salaam at this very closed-door meeting also discussed a number of issues that the Nigerian government or the authorities need to put in place before the year 2030 to ensure the delivery of sustainable energy, contributing to the Mission 300 program of the AfDB and the World Bank. And we also have testimonies about how much Nigeria is achieving in the field of mini-grid electricity.
Providing power, access to electricity, which is a human right, which is like blood in the body to Nigerians, as well as to providing access to clean cooking technology. We have prepared the grounds for this effort. Our own target is universal access by 2030. We set that target in our national development plans even before Mission 300, which of course we welcome wholeheartedly. And we have prepared the ground by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's courageous, bold, and very decisive macroeconomic reforms with the help of our multilateral development partners, which fundamentally has prepared the ground for our own successful foray into this important area of provision of energy, provision of electricity. Because the key is funding, the key is private sector funding. And if you're going to have that, you need a stable macroeconomic environment, as well as, of course, sensible policies, sensible regulatory environment. We've prepared ourselves for that. And what we are looking forward to now, particularly from the private sector in this room, is to buy into our story and come in and make the profits that are available for efficient provision of electricity to the Nigerians in towns, in cities, in rural areas, across the whole value chain.
The Nigeria energy sector is probably one of the most analyzed sectors on the continent. I've been analyzing this sector since 2005, when the Electricity Reform Act was passed. So we know a lot, and we know a lot about what to do. I mean, and I'm quite pleased that this discussion has been very honest. We've talked about collection losses. We've talked about electricity theft, the liquidity issues in the sector. We've talked about metering gap. So we know the issues, and we just need to get moving and to solve them. And Dio said something quite interesting. He said the private sector needs to see a clear line of sight to profitability or returns. There are a few investors in this room that I know invested without seeing that clear line of sight. So I'm going to call on Mr. Kola Adesina. I see him nodding his head, right?
In terms of the number of slides I saw in 2002, 2005, this slide is fewer, so it's not as long as that, because I recall with vivid displeasure that we had a gas master plan that remained exactly what it is, a master plan. I think doing is what we need to really focus on. We know all the issues. I think it's time to roll our sleeves and get to work.
There have been 3 serious drug addictions that the country has suffered from. An addiction to price controls when it comes to fuel, price controls when it comes to foreign exchange, and price controls when it comes to the price of power. This administration has aggressively tackled 2 of those addictions: the subsidies on fuel and controls on foreign exchange. And they are attacking the 3rd. Thanks to the efforts of both the honorable ministers and the President's Special Advisor on Energy, the very dynamic Mrs. Olufehen. So I was going to say a lot of plaudits about these 3 individuals, but it would bore you. What I think is more relevant, perhaps, is if I just tell the reporters and investors in this room to look out for something. So look out for a press release from Azura at some point this year saying that we are making a major investment in the distribution sector. That business as usual scenario, and I mean that because I've been in this sector for 15 years, is not going to happen. I can see from those who are leading this administration, their commitment, their determination, and my fellow shareholders are convinced that we need to be in that competitive game. And if you are not keeping an eye on Nigeria's distribution sector, which needs 8.5 billion, which sounds a lot. So it's not a pipe dream. Yeah, we've been able to raise 1.5 billion. Kola has been able to raise much larger sums. It can be done.
You know, distribution is the kind of unloved child. When we did the privatization in 2013, I was working for an institution where we probably raised more money for investors than any other investment bank in the market at the time. And we were very optimistic. The plan was to list those distribution companies within 5 years, but it didn't happen. And there's a lot of water that's gone under the bridge. So let me call on somebody who knows distribution, Mrs. Folake Shoeton from Ikeja Disco. Please give us your reflections, because distribution is really the coal face. You're feeding the rest of the value chain. You guys are the ones collecting the money. You're suffering the energy theft, the bypassing. So what are your instincts? How do you respond to what government has presented?
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not so sure what I need to say again, because I think that we definitely have skin in the game. And it's been 11 years now, or going on 11 years. And we've done a lot to try and ensure we can tackle some of the challenges. So I'm sitting down here very excited at the possibilities of getting investors to actually come into the market. And I'm a living testament. That is myself. You can see my chairman is here. We have another partner here, the oil and gas part. And I'm happy he's here because I want him to continue to support us internally. But the point is, I think I'm very excited. There's a lot of opportunity in Nigeria. And I really hope that private investors that are here are encouraged to definitely want to put some money in Nigeria. Thank you.
Agencies or regulators. And I would love to see added to that compact the creation of an academy in Abuja that brings Rural Electrification Agency officials, regulators, and other key aspects of scaling mini grids across Africa to Nigeria, the shadow of those agencies, to learn from them directly, and then take those learnings back so that they don't have to repeat the same mistakes that Nigeria made, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel all over again. I can't stress that enough. I think Nigeria is such a shining example of what was done right. Sure, there are issues, right? But I think that so much has gone right in Nigeria, thanks to the World Bank, thanks to the African Development Bank as well. So anyway, thank you very much.
If we look at Nigeria and infrastructure development over the last 25 years, to my mind, the most significant transformation has come from taking Nigeria from 460,000 fixed lines to 216 million mobile connections. I think we all need to pay some attention to what it was that was done right around the telecom sector over a 20-year period to deliver that. And when I listen today to all of the conversations around tariffing, it really does bother me, because I think the early days of mobile telecoms in Nigeria clearly point to why we cannot continue to think about a tariff-controlled environment. And what we've done with Band A is interesting, but it's not significant enough. Capping tariffs when you have no supply is just completely illogical. And what you have to do is to create the unique set of circumstances that will allow capital to come. We need to recognize the primacy of capital markets in this process. Every single country is significantly invested in its power infrastructure since the end of the Second World War, has done so financing its debt primarily in its local currency.
Nigeria's journey to energy sustainability by the year 2030 has actually started. But of course, the country has a lot to do to deliver within the next 5 years on this promise of the new energy compact. Reporting for Frontier Africa Reports, I am Bustin Omofaye.